My name is Cora Dean, and I am 28 years old. I make my living with my hands, shaping clay into forms that I hope bring a little bit of quiet beauty into the world. My life has always been a gentle one, built around the slow turning of the potter's wheel and the solace I find in solitude. I never imagined that my brother's wedding, an event meant to celebrate love and union, would end with his new bride striking me across the face in front of 200 guests. The reason? I would not give them my home, the house my grandmother, my soul's truest anchor, had left to me and me alone. In the ringing silence that followed the slap, as a collective gasp rippled through the grand ballroom, my mother, Margaret, leaned in close, her whisper a blade of ice against my burning cheek. "Don't you dare make a scene, Cora. Just leave quietly." And so I did. But what unfolded in the days that followed was a quiet revolution, a reclaiming of self that changed not only my life, but the very foundation of my family. Before I share this journey, a story of how a craftsman bungalow on Aspen Row became the unlikely battleground for my own independence, I want to invite you into this space. This isn't just a story of family conflict, it's a testament to the quiet strength it takes to honor one's own truth. My grandmother, Genevieve, was the sun around which my small world orbited. She wasn't just a grandmother, she was my mentor, my confidant, my quiet co-conspirator in a world that often felt too loud. Her home, a lovingly preserved 1920s craftsman bungalow, was my sanctuary from childhood. It wasn't grand, but it was perfect. It had deep, welcoming eaves, a wide front porch with a swing, and beautiful stained glass windows that cast jewel-tone light across the dark wood floors. I spent countless weekends there, learning the names of the birds that visited her feeders, helping her tend the sprawling garden fragrant with lavender and climbing roses, and listening to her stories as we shelled peas on the porch. My brother, Julian, who is 4 years my senior, never shared my affinity for Grandma Genevieve or her home. As a boy, he was all sharp angles and restless energy, always finding a reason to be elsewhere, a soccer game, a friend's house, an urgent school project. He found the quiet rhythms of our grandmother's life to be, in his words, excruciatingly dull. As we grew older, this pattern solidified. His university years were marked by obligatory phone calls on holidays, and after he graduated and began a promising career in public relations, his visits dwindled to a perfunctory stop-in once or twice a year. His presence more a gesture than a genuine connection. I, on the other hand, wove my adult life around her. After finishing art school, I set up my pottery studio in a small town just a half-hour's drive from her bungalow. I would visit her several times a week, bringing groceries, driving her to appointments, or simply sharing a pot of Earl Grey tea in her cozy sunroom, watching the light change through the leaves of the ancient oak in her backyard. When she was diagnosed with lung cancer 5 years ago, it was an unspoken understanding that I would be the one to care for her. Those last 2 years were a tapestry of heartache and profound love. I converted my part-time pottery work into a mostly online business so I could be with her, managing her medications, taking her to treatments, and eventually, with the help of hospice, providing the care that allowed her to remain in the home she adored until the very end. Julian visited twice during her illness. Once after the initial diagnosis, a visit that lasted less than an hour. The second time was a week before she passed away. He stood awkwardly in the doorway of her room, his discomfort a palpable thing in the sacred quiet. My parents, Margaret and Arthur, visited more often, but their presence was always tinged with a sense of duty, a checklist of familial obligation being ticked off. When Grandma Genevieve died 3 years ago, a part of my own landscape eroded. She had been more of a mother to me than my own, whose love often seemed conditional on appearances and achievements. The reading of the will was a surprise to everyone but me. With the exception of a classic watch for Julian and a modest sum of money, she left the entirety of her estate, the bungalow, her savings, and all her personal belongings to me. "She left you the house," my mother, Margaret, had exclaimed, her voice sharp with disbelief. "But Julian is the man, the one who will have a family. It should have been split." My father, Arthur, ever the peacemaker, placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Margaret, it was Genevieve's decision. She knew what she was doing. Julian said nothing, but the tight set of his jaw and the cool distance in his eyes spoke volumes. He believed he was entitled to half of it, despite having invested almost nothing of himself in our grandmother's life. For me, the house was never about its monetary value. It was a vessel for my love for Genevieve, a continuation of her spirit. I moved in immediately, pouring my grief and love into its bones. I spent every spare penny and weekend carefully restoring it, sanding and refinishing the original oak floors, updating the wiring, and transforming a small back bedroom into a sun-drenched pottery studio. The house became my haven, my pride, the place where I felt most myself. About a year after I had settled in, Julian stopped by unannounced. He walked through the rooms, giving small, appreciative nods at the work I'd done. "You know," he said, leaning against the new butcher block countertop in the kitchen, his tone casual, "this place must have doubled in value. If you sold it, we could both use the money for a down payment on our own places." The mug I was holding nearly slipped from my fingers. "Julian, this is my home. Grandma left it to me because she knew I would cherish it, not liquidate it." "Come on, Cora," he'd replied, a hard edge creeping into his voice. "You know it's not entirely fair. We're both her grandchildren." That was the first time I realized the house would be a permanent point of contention, a shadow between my brother and me. What I didn't know was that this shadow was about to grow infinitely darker with the arrival of Serafina. Julian met Serafina Dubois at a gallery opening. From the first time he spoke of her, his voice held a different tenor, a mix of awe and infatuation. Serafina wasn't just ambitious, she was a curator of her own life. At 31, she was a brand consultant for high-end lifestyle companies, a woman who moved through the world with an effortless, expensive grace. The first time I met her was at my parents' house for Sunday dinner. She arrived in a cream-colored silk blouse and trousers that probably cost more than my kiln, carrying a bespoke leather satchel. Her smile was flawless, her manners impeccable. My parents, especially my mother, were instantly captivated. "Julian tells me you're living in your grandmother's old bungalow," Serafina said to me as we sat in the living room, her voice smooth as velvet. "How charming. Is it in one of those historic districts?" I described the neighborhood and a little of the home's history, feeling a strange pressure to justify its significance. "Oh, I know Aspen Row," she replied, her dark eyes lighting up with a keen, appraising glint. "Those craftsman homes are absolute treasures when restored properly. The return on investment in that area is phenomenal." It was the first red flag, subtle but clear. Her mind went immediately to its market value, not its heart value. Julian and Serafina's romance was a whirlwind. Engaged within 4 months, they set a wedding date for just 6 months later. My mother was ecstatic, diving headfirst into wedding planning with Serafina, the two of them bonding over floral arrangements and guest lists. My father seemed quietly pleased that Julian had found someone so polished and successful. As the wedding plans progressed, so did Serafina's fascination with my house. She began dropping by, always with a plausible excuse. "I was just consulting with a client nearby and thought I'd pop in and see the progress you've made," she'd say, her eyes scanning my living room, my studio, my garden, not with warmth, but with an unnerving sense of assessment. "You know, with my background in aesthetics, I could offer some thoughts on how to really maximize the property's appeal." During one visit, about 3 months before the wedding, she sat at my kitchen table, sipping the herbal tea I'd offered her, and made her first real move. "You know, Cora," she began, her tone light and friendly, "Julian and I have been house hunting, and the market is just brutal. We were thinking, wouldn't it be a beautiful story if we were to buy this place from you? It would keep it in the family. And you could use the money to find a chic little condo, something more manageable for a single artist." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "Serafina, I appreciate the thought, but I'm not selling. This is my home." Her smile tightened for a fraction of a second before the pleasant mask slipped back into place. "Of course. I completely understand. Just a thought. Family helping family, you know." The more time Serafina spent with my family, the more I saw her subtle artistry of manipulation. Julian, once headstrong, began to defer to her on everything. My parents, and Margaret in particular, started quoting her as if she were an oracle. Serafina says the caterer you suggested isn't quite up to par for the kind of guests we're expecting, my mother told me. Serafina thinks you should wear a simpler dress as a bridesmaid, so you don't pull focus, she said another time. Every family gathering became a masterclass in her technique. She would compliment my mother's taste, then subtly undermine her choices. She would feign vulnerability with my father to win his sympathy. She would gently mock my pottery as a sweet little hobby. I felt like I was the only one who could see the strings. The pressure about the house became a relentless, low-frequency hum in the background of my life. During a family dinner 2 months before the wedding, Serafina brought it up again, sighing dramatically about their housing search. If only there were a simple, elegant solution right in front of us, she said, her gaze landing squarely on me. Serafina, I said, my voice steady despite the hammering in my chest. I've told you. My house isn't for sale. Oh, not for sale, she laughed, a sound with no warmth in it. But what a meaningful wedding gift it would be. Julian has memories there too, after all. That's when my mother joined the chorus. Cora, don't be so possessive. Your brother is starting a family. This house is meant for a family. It would be a beautiful gesture of support. I looked at Julian, pleading with my eyes for him to intervene, to say something, anything. He just stared down at his perfectly arranged plate of food, a silent accomplice to the siege. That night, I drove home with the sickening realization that this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about my place in my own family, and it was a place that was rapidly shrinking. In the 2 months leading up to the wedding, the gentle hum of pressure became a deafening roar. What had started as Serafina's subtle suggestions morphed into a full-scale emotional campaign orchestrated by my mother. Margaret's calls became a daily ritual of guilt and accusation. Julian is the man of the family, Cora. He needs a substantial home to build his life, she'd insist. You're being selfish, hoarding that big house all to yourself. What would Genevieve think of this behavior? Grandma would think she wanted me to have it, which is why she left it to me, I'd reply, my voice weary from the repetitive battle. That's not how families are supposed to work, my mother would retort, her voice rising. Families share. They sacrifice for one another. My father, Arthur, remained trapped in his role as a conflict-averse diplomat. Your mother just wants what's best for everyone, he'd say when I tried to confide in him, his neutrality a form of passive endorsement that allowed the pressure to intensify. Julian, for his part, remained strategically silent on the issue, letting Serafina and our mother be his proxies. In our rare moments alone, he would adopt a posture of weary resignation. I just wish we could find a solution that makes everyone happy, Cora. His version of happy, I was beginning to understand, was one where he got everything he wanted without having to fight for it himself. The situation came to a head on a Friday afternoon 3 weeks before the wedding. I pulled into my driveway after a long day in the studio to find Serafina's sleek black sedan parked by the curb, along with a gleaming silver Range Rover I didn't recognize. My heart sank. As I walked through my own front door, I was met with the surreal sight of Serafina giving a guided tour of my living room to a polished, older couple. And the original built-in cabinetry is just exquisite, Serafina was saying, gesturing toward the bookcases my grandfather had built for Genevieve. We plan to keep all the historical integrity, of course, while creating a more open, modern flow in the kitchen and master suite. I stood frozen in the entryway, a wave of cold fury washing over me. Serafina saw me, and her smile didn't even falter. Cora, perfect timing. Let me introduce you to the Caldwells. They're dear friends, and I was just showing them the incredible potential of the place. Everyone out, I said. My voice was quiet, but it vibrated with an intensity that surprised even me. Now. The Caldwells exchanged a nervous glance, murmured awkward apologies, and scurried past me out the door. The moment it clicked shut, Serafina's charming facade dissolved. That was incredibly rude, Cora. The Caldwells are very influential. What's rude, I shot back, my hands trembling, is conducting tours of my home without my knowledge or permission. How did you even get in? She waved a dismissive hand. Julian still has a key from years ago. Honestly, I don't see why you're making such a fuss. It's practically our house already. Serafina, I said, taking a step toward her, my voice low and dangerous. For the last time. I am not giving you this house. Not as a gift. Not for sale. Not ever. It is my home. You need to accept that. Her eyes narrowed. And then, to my utter astonishment, she crumpled. Not into quiet tears, but into a performance of theatrical, heaving sobs. I've tried so hard with you, she wailed, dabbing at her dry eyes. I just want to be part of this family, and you're trying to ruin everything for me and Julian. I would later learn that she had called my mother the second she got into her car, painting a dramatic picture of my unhinged, cruel behavior. My phone rang less than 5 minutes later. How dare you humiliate Serafina like that? My mother's voice shrieked down the line. After everything she's done to include you, to be gracious to you, your grandmother would be turning in her grave. My attempts to explain what had actually happened were futile. My mother had her villain, and it was me. The final, desperate push came at a family dinner the weekend before the wedding. My mother had insisted on it, a final chance to clear the air. The tension around my parents' dining table was thick enough to cut with a knife. Cora, my mother began, placing her silverware down with a sharp click. We need to finalize the details of your wedding gift to Julian and Serafina. Mom, there is nothing to finalize, I said, looking her directly in the eye. I have made my position clear. This stubbornness is unbecoming, she snapped. Serafina and Julian need this. You are one person in a 3-bedroom house. It's illogical. It's a 3-bedroom house that was left to me, I repeated, my voice strained. Genevieve would have wanted you to share. Julian finally spoke, his voice laced with manufactured reason. Cora, just be practical. The house is too big for you. Serafina and I would fill it with life. We'd honor Grandma's memory by starting our family there. I looked from face to face. My mother's steely disapproval. My father's pained, avoidant gaze. Julian's smooth entitlement. And Serafina's carefully crafted expression of a wounded victim. In that moment, the profound depth of my isolation was a physical ache in my chest. This conversation is over, I said, pushing my chair back and standing. I am not giving away my home. And if none of you can respect that, then perhaps I shouldn't be a part of this wedding at all. Don't be so melodramatic, my mother hissed. You will be in your brother's wedding, and you will smile, and you will behave. This family has an image to uphold. I walked out of my parents' house that night with a cold dread settling in my bones. The wedding was no longer a celebration to be endured, but a trap waiting to be sprung. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, a perfect late September afternoon on the coast. The venue was a historic waterfront estate with sprawling lawns and panoramic views of the bay, exactly the kind of place that would look spectacular in Serafina's meticulously curated wedding album. I arrived at the bridal suite at the appointed time, my pale gray bridesmaid dress in its bag, my stomach in a tight, anxious knot. The suite was a whirlwind of hairspray, champagne, and sycophantic praise. Serafina sat enthroned in a velvet armchair while a makeup artist worked on her face. Her own 3 bridesmaids, all women with the same polished, wealthy sheen as her, fluttered around her. My mother was there too, beaming as if she were the mother of a princess. Cora, you're late, my mother admonished, though I was precisely on time. Serafina glanced at me in the mirror, her voice a syrupy confection. It's fine, Margaret. As long as she's presentable for the photographs. The hours before the ceremony were a masterclass in polite exclusion. The other bridesmaids chattered about shared memories and inside jokes. During the formal photos, the photographer, clearly briefed by Serafina, consistently placed me at the far edge of the group. When he suggested a candid shot of the bride with her new sister, Serafina deftly redirected him. Oh, we're so short on time. Let's make sure we get the full bridal party first. I managed to catch Julian alone for a moment near the gardens. Nervous? I asked, trying to inject some genuine warmth into my voice. He barely looked at me, his eyes scanning the grounds for Serafina. Just want everything to be perfect for her. She's planned every detail. Julian, I said softly. Are we okay? This whole thing with the house. Not today, Cora, he cut me off, his voice firm. "Let's just get through today without any drama. Please." The ceremony was as flawless and impersonal as a corporate event. 200 guests watched as Serafina, in a couture gown that seemed to shimmer with its own light, walked down an aisle carpeted in white rose petals. Julian looked handsome, his eyes fixed on his bride with an expression of pure adoration. As I stood at the altar, I tried to conjure a feeling of happiness for my brother. But all I could feel was a deep, sorrowful premonition. The reception took place in the estate's grand ballroom, a space dripping with crystals and overflowing with opulent floral displays. I was seated at a family table, a buffer zone away from the head table. After a lavish dinner, the speeches began. The best man gave a warm, funny toast. Serafina's maid of honor gave a speech about how Serafina was a woman who always manifested her desires, a line that sounded aspirational to most, but to me, sounded like a threat. Then, Serafina stood up, taking the microphone. This was not on the schedule. "I just want to say a few words from the heart," she began, her voice resonating through the silent room. She thanked her guests, her parents, and then she turned to my family. "And to my new family. Arthur and Margaret, thank you for welcoming me as a daughter." My parents glowed. "And to Cora." Every head in the ballroom turned to me. A spotlight, it seemed, found my face. "My new sister has given us the most meaningful wedding gift imaginable, and I wanted to take this moment to publicly thank her for her incredible generosity." My blood turned to ice. This was it. The trap. "As many of you know," Serafina continued, her voice filled with emotion, "Cora inherited their grandmother's beautiful home. And in a true act of selfless family love, she is gifting that home to us. We are so moved and so excited to begin our married life in a place that holds so much family history." A wave of applause started to build. People were smiling at me, nodding in approval. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a napkin. Julian stared at his plate, his jaw tight. Serafina was suddenly standing beside my chair, holding out the microphone to me, her smile a terrifyingly perfect mask. "Cora, would you like to say a few words about your beautiful gift?" The room was utterly silent. 200 pairs of eyes were on me, waiting. My hands were shaking, my throat was dry. This was a public execution, designed to corner me into either validating her lie or appearing as a cruel, petty monster on my brother's wedding day. I took a slow, deep breath and rose to my feet. I looked not at Serafina, but out at the sea of expectant faces. "I'm afraid," I said, my voice clearer and stronger than I expected, "that there has been a profound misunderstanding." The silence in the room became heavy, absolute. Serafina's smile froze. "While I wish Julian and Serafina a lifetime of happiness," I continued, "I am not giving them my home. Cora is just being modest." Serafina trilled into the microphone, her laugh high and brittle. "We've been planning this for months." "No, Serafina," I said, meeting her furious gaze. "We have not. The house is my home, and it is not a gift." The mask shattered. Her beautiful face contorted into a mask of pure rage. She snatched the microphone back. "How dare you," she hissed, the words amplified throughout the stunned ballroom. "You selfish, ungrateful little." And then her hand flew through the air. The crack of her palm connecting with my cheek echoed louder than any word she had spoken. A collective gasp swept the room. Someone dropped a wine glass. I stumbled back a step, my cheek stinging, hot tears of shock and humiliation blurring my vision. My mother was instantly at my side, but not to comfort me. She gripped my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Don't make a scene," she whispered, her voice a venomous hiss. "Just leave. Quietly." I looked over at the head table. Julian sat motionless, a statue, his face pale as he watched his new wife publicly assault his sister. With a last shred of dignity, I straightened my shoulders, picked up my small clutch from the table, and turned. I walked through the parted sea of shocked and bewildered guests, my head held high. The cool night air on the terrace was a relief, a balm on my burning skin. I didn't let the tears fall until I was safely inside my car, the sound of my own ragged sobs filling the small space. Somehow, I drove home to the house that had caused all of this, my sanctuary that had become a battlefield. I collapsed onto the living room couch, still in my bridesmaid dress, the scent of lavender from the garden drifting in through the open window, a scent of a life that suddenly felt a million miles away. I woke the next morning on the couch, the pale light of dawn filtering through the windows. For a few blissful seconds, I was adrift in the peaceful fog of just waking, and then memory crashed down on me like a tidal wave. Serafina's lie, the sharp sting of the slap, my mother's cold dismissal, Julian's unforgivable silence. The long, lonely walk out of that ballroom. My phone, which I'd silenced, lay on the coffee table showing dozens of missed calls and a flood of text messages. A quick scan showed they were mostly from my mother and Julian, with a few from my father and some concerned friends who had been guests. I brewed a strong pot of coffee, my hands still shaking slightly, and began to read. My mother's texts were a torrent of fury. How could you do this to your brother? You've humiliated this entire family. You need to call and apologize to Serafina immediately. Julian's were laced with a self-pitying anger. Thanks for ruining my wedding day. Sophia is devastated because of your jealousy. I hope you're happy. You need to make this right with my wife. The use of Sophia instead of Serafina was a Freudian slip that almost made me laugh. It seemed his brain was already trying to distance himself from the reality of the woman he had married. My father's single message was more measured. Cora, we need to talk. This has gone too far. Call me when you can. Then a new message popped up. It was a group text from Serafina, sent, I would soon learn, to every single wedding guest. Dearest friends and family, Julian and I want to apologize for the unfortunate scene at our reception. We are heartbroken that Cora chose our special day to publicly retract a generous gift she had promised, causing immense pain. We ask for your love and support as we navigate this difficult family matter. We will be proceeding with our honeymoon to Tuscany as planned. The audacity of it stole my breath. She was doubling down, painting herself as the gracious victim of my cruel, unpredictable behavior. My phone rang. It was my mother. Have you seen Serafina's beautiful message? She demanded. Everyone is talking. The Caldwells just called, utterly appalled at your behavior. Our family's reputation is in tatters because of your selfishness. Mom, I said, my voice trembling with a rage I could barely contain. She lied. I never promised her the house. And then she hit me. In front of everyone. Why am I the one who is selfish? You could have just played along for the evening, she retorted. We could have sorted it out privately. Now you've made us all look like fools. This is about family, Cora, not about a building. It's my home. I cried. And she is not family, she is a stranger who is trying to take it from me. The conversation ended with my mother issuing an ultimatum. I was to apologize to Serafina and agree to work something out about the house, or I would be considered outside the family. Serafina is Julian's wife now, she declared. You need to accept that and make peace. I hung up, feeling nauseous. The gaslighting was so complete, so profound, that I started to feel a dizzying sense of disorientation. Was I going crazy? Later that afternoon, a call came from an unknown number. It was a woman named Eleanor, a neighbor from a few streets over who had attended the wedding with her husband, a colleague of Julian's. Cora, I hope this isn't too forward, she said, her voice kind. I saw what happened last night, and I wanted to see if you were all right. Something about it felt very wrong. Her simple act of kindness was enough to make my voice crack. I'm hanging on, I managed. Listen, she continued, lowering her voice. I don't know the whole story, but Serafina has been telling people for months that she and Julian were moving into your house. She invited a few of us from my book club to a housewarming party there next month. She had the date and everything. We all just assumed it was a done deal. I sank onto a kitchen chair, the phone pressed hard against my ear. She planned a housewarming party? At my house? Yes. She was showing us paint swatches and talking about taking down a wall between the kitchen and dining room. When I asked if we could see inside, she said you were being a bit emotionally resistant to the transition and it was best to wait. After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence. This wasn't a wedding day impulse. This was premeditated. This was a long con, and the wedding was meant to be the final, public checkmate. That single phone call was the crack in the dam. Other calls trickled in from guests who felt uneasy about Serafina's narrative. My cousin Chloe called to say she'd overheard Serafina at the rehearsal dinner, telling Julian, "Don't worry, once we're married and she makes the announcement, she won't be able to back out. The social pressure will be too much." The most damning piece of information came from my old college roommate, Nina, whom I called on a hunch, remembering she had worked in the art world in the same city as Serafina for a few years. "Serafina Dubois?" Nina had said, a slow whistle escaping her lips. "Oh, I know that name." She left a trail of wreckage. There was a gallery owner she dated, convinced him to co-sign on a lease for a penthouse apartment, then left him with the bill. And before him, an architect. She has a pattern, Cora. She finds successful, stable men and leeches off them until she finds a better prospect. By nightfall, my grief and shock had begun to calcify into a cold, hard resolve. I had been cornered, manipulated, and assaulted. My family had abandoned me in favor of a narrative spun by a predator. I looked around at the warm, quiet rooms of my grandmother's house, at the light pooling on the worn floorboards. This house was a legacy of love, and I would not let it be consumed by avarice and deceit. Serafina had started this war, but I was going to be the one to finish it. While Julian and Serafina were sipping Prosecco in Tuscany, blissfully unaware, I began to build my case. My first move was to hire a private investigator. It felt dramatic, like something out of a movie, but Nina's stories about Serafina had convinced me that this was beyond simple family drama. I needed facts, not just hearsay. While I waited for the investigator's report, I took a quieter, more personal step. I went to see my father. I met him at a small cafe downtown, a neutral territory. "Dad," I began, laying it all out for him. The unannounced tour, Serafina's history as described by Nina, the pre-planned housewarming party. I spoke calmly, presenting the sequence of events without the emotional charge of my mother's phone calls. He listened, his brow furrowed, stirring his coffee over and over. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Your mother, she is so invested in the image of this perfect marriage for Julian," he said, more to himself than to me. "She can't see anything that contradicts it." "But you can, can't you?" I asked gently. "You saw her hit me, Dad. You saw it." He finally looked up, and for the first time, I saw not just a peacemaker, but a man grappling with his own complicity. "Yes," he said, his voice heavy. "I saw it. And I did nothing. I am so sorry, Cora." It was the apology my mother would never give me, and it was enough. He agreed to talk to Julian when he returned, to present a united front. We had our first small crack in Serafina's fortress. The investigator's report arrived a week later in a manila envelope. It was even more damning than I had anticipated. Serafina had been engaged once before, to a man whose family owned a lucrative portfolio of commercial real estate. The engagement ended abruptly when the man's father refused to put a valuable beachfront property in both their names before the wedding. The report included the contact information for the ex-fiancée's mother. My hands trembled as I dialed the number. A woman named Mrs. Sterling answered. When I explained who I was, there was a weary sigh on the other end of the line. "So she's at it again," Mrs. Sterling said. "Let me tell you about Serafina Dubois." Her story was a chilling echo of my own. The whirlwind romance, the charming of the family, the gradual isolation of anyone who questioned her, and the laser focus on a piece of property. "She's a sociopath, my dear," Mrs. Sterling said bluntly. "She mimics human emotion, but she feels nothing but ambition. She saw our son as a key, and the house was the door she wanted to unlock." Armed with this, I prepared for Julian's return. I compiled everything: a timeline of events, Eleanor's written statement about the housewarming party, Nina's testimony, and a printout of the private investigator's report with Mrs. Sterling's story highlighted. My father arranged the meeting. Julian came to my house alone at Dad's insistence. He was tanned, but his face was tight with resentment. "Dad said I had to come," he said, standing stiffly in my entryway. "I don't know what you think you're going to accomplish with this. Serafina is my wife." "Just read this, Julian," I said, handing him the folder. Please. As your sister, I am asking you to just read it. He took it reluctantly and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Serafina had first made her move. I watched his face as he read. I saw his smug certainty begin to fray, replaced by confusion, then dawning horror. When he got to Mrs. Sterling's story, he looked up, his face pale. This can't be real, he stammered. She wouldn't. There must be an explanation. There is, my father said, speaking for the first time. He had been standing quietly by the doorway. The explanation is that you married a con artist. She told me you promised us the house, Julian whispered, his eyes wide with a terrible, dawning comprehension. She said you were just having cold feet and that the public announcement would be a lovely way to make it official. She said we should go ahead and put down deposits with a contractor. He trailed off, the financial implications hitting him. It was heartbreaking to watch the architecture of his perfect life crumble around him. He left my house that night a different man, shaken and silent. As I expected, when Julian confronted Serafina, she launched a masterful counterattack. There were tears, accusations, claims that I had fabricated everything out of jealousy. She called my mother, who rallied to her defense. She even tried to discredit me professionally, calling the gallery that sold my pottery and suggesting I was unstable. But her foundation was cracked. Julian couldn't unsee the evidence. My father was now my staunchest ally, calmly deflecting my mother's hysterics. The end came a week later. Serafina, in a move of stunning arrogance, showed up at my front door. "You think you've won, don't you?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. The mask was completely gone. "This was never a game, Serafina," I said calmly, standing in my doorway. "He'll choose me," she spat. "He loves me. And your mother will always choose appearances over your pathetic little feelings. You'll end up alone in this dusty old house, and I'll have everything. Is that why you came here? To tell me that?" Her expression shifted, becoming shrewd. "No. I came to make you an offer. Name your price. What will it take for you to just give us the house and disappear?" Unbeknownst to her, my phone was in my pocket, recording the entire conversation. It was the final, irrefutable piece of evidence. When Julian heard the recording of his wife trying to buy me off after threatening me, the spell was finally, irrevocably broken. The casual cruelty in her voice, the transactional nature of her words, it was something he could not explain away. He moved out that day and filed for an annulment on the grounds of fraud. 6 months have passed since the wedding that wasn't. The annulment was granted, expedited by evidence of the significant debt Serafina had hidden from Julian. She has since moved to another city, and word has it she is now dating a recently divorced tech mogul. A new door, a new key. The seasons have turned on Aspen Row. My grandmother's garden is dormant now, resting under a thin blanket of frost, but inside, the house is warm and full of life. My life. Healing is not a linear path, it's a quiet, circling journey. My relationship with Julian is slowly being rebuilt. He is humbled, quieter, and buried in debt from the wedding and the deposits Serafina charged to their joint credit cards. He comes over for dinner once a week. We don't talk much about what happened, not directly. Instead, we talk about books, about his new, less glamorous job, about the memories of our childhood that came before the shadows fell. One evening, he looked around my living room and said, "Grandma knew. She knew you were the right one to be its keeper." It was his apology, and I accepted it. My father and I are closer than ever. He comes over on Saturdays, and we work on the house together, fixing a leaky faucet, refinishing the porch railings. In these quiet, shared tasks, we are rebuilding more than just a house. My mother is the most complicated part of the story. She has never explicitly apologized. Her pride is a fortress as formidable as Serafina's ambition. But she has started to come around, bearing peace offerings of homemade soup or a new plant for my garden. During her last visit, she stood in my studio, watching me work at the wheel. "You have a gift, Cora," she said softly. "Genevieve always said you had strong, steady hands." It was the closest she would ever get to saying I was right, that I was strong, that she was sorry. It was enough. The house, my beautiful craftsman bungalow, feels more my own than ever. It is no longer just a legacy from my grandmother, but a testament to my own resilience. It absorbed the shock of the conflict and held me in its quiet, sturdy embrace. It taught me that a home is not just a structure, but a boundary. It is the place where you decide who gets to enter, what values are honored, and what behavior is unacceptable. I learned that standing up for yourself, especially to the people you love, is one of an adult's most difficult and necessary tasks. It's a quiet, often lonely rebellion. But in the stillness that follows, you can finally hear your own voice clearly. And you realize that your own peace, your own truth, is the most valuable thing you will ever own. I wonder if this story touches a chord in any of you. Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand with your own family to protect something precious to you? I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, a like or a subscription would mean a great deal. Thank you for letting me share my story. Remember to be the keeper of your own home, in whatever form it takes.